curious chimps.
I mean, in a sense, is it a battle? Yeah, it's a battle. You know, there's still a lot of people who, and I tell this story in my book, or I touch on it like with a few sentences. But look, my sister and my nieces and my brother-in-law live less than a quarter mile up the road from me, and she was so offended about the idea of my book, before I even published it, that she cut off communication with me, and would not let me see my nieces for about 3 months. I mean, we've gotten back together now and everything's good now, but there was a period of about 3 months, writing this book, and a couple times where I asked myself, is this worth it? Is it worth it that my sister might not ever let me see my nieces again, to write this book? And I had to make that call, because look, a real activist is going to speak out knowing that there's negative consequences, and when they face them with their head up, with pride. Because that is, when we talk about activism on a scale or a line, just speaking out is only half the equation. Accepting the negative consequences with pride and your head held high, and not making that trigger you into anger or hate, is the other half of being an effective activist. And I realized that early on. I thought back to, Martin Luther King, when he was jailed, when he wrote the letters from the jail, there was no hate or being upset in that. He took those consequences with his head held high. And that's why we're still talking about him today as being a great man and an activist, and a leader. Because of that, and we could go on and on through history, through great activists who, took consequences from an oppressor with their head held high, and it didn't trigger them to hate or say bad things. And so, yeah, that's kind of where I am on that.
That's huge, man. I commend you, man. It must have been scary to have this this sword over your head about like possibly losing your family. And I mean, you can rationalize it like, if they really love me, blah blah blah, they're gonna see that I'm doing something that's good. But like in the end, it's her beliefs. It's maybe wrapped around the fact that you were an addict, and for her, it's just drugs. Like there's such a web of complication. And at the end of the day, you may be losing people who are really important to you. So for you to hit the gas, props, man. That's really a scary moment.
And looking back, it did have to do with me. She does not understand about, what exactly psilocybin is, or what it does, or what's the frequency of use, things like that. In her head, and I figured this out later, in her head, she literally thought I was sitting here just eating mushrooms all day. So it was just a misunderstanding. And look, instead of being upset with her that she should have known all this, to me, it just showed me that there's an overarching issue with just basic knowledge of exactly what these substances are, what they do, frequency and dosage, things like that. So, I just took it, as I do with most things in life, as a learning experience, and just kind of use that to fit now my paradigm of what needs to be done as far as changing attitudes and beliefs. And I think sometimes in the community, we take for granted the fact that some people just lack basic knowledge of these things. And, and again, through no fault of their own. I mean, there's been 50, 60 years of just horrible social constructions built around these substances that need to be broken down. Psilocybin's only killed one recorded person in 10,000 years of use in a medically compromised individual that had heart trouble. Okay. Most people don't know that. A lot of people outside the community don't know that. I mean, that fact alone should be compelling enough to start softening how we view these things, or how society views these things. And so that's why I was hoping my book, I wrote it twofold. One, for people in the community to be able to be armed with the scientific facts, so that way they could go out and put a cogent argument together in defense of psilocybin. And then two, for people who weren't privy to a lot of this information, to be able to read it, absorb, and maybe change or soften their views, which might, get passed on to the next one, to the next one, to the next one. Mm-hmm. And so that was my hopes in writing it. And, we'll see what the future holds. But I hope to make a dent or soften the way people view some, it's psilocybin, and then obviously I'm going to continue on with some other substances as well.